Hello, and welcome to this week's Retroactive Podcast. As usual, before we get into it, I'm going to take a few moments to look at the craziness that is this world of ours. So I thought we'd play a little game. Good story, bad story, laugh story. Good story. I saw a really sweet video on TikTok, of all places, that restored my faith in humanity. So, it was a really sweet video of an elderly woman trying to cross a road at a crosswalk with her walker. She is moving incredibly slow, steps out when no cars are coming, but she's about, 2 feet away from the curb by the time a car has appeared. And she's doing her best to get across the street, but, she's not able to move very fast with that walker. So the car stops, doesn't act rude, doesn't honk and carry on and act like they're the only person on the planet. But the part that was surprising was that out of the car, the driver's side and the passenger's side door opens, and these two young men get out, leave their car there running in the street, pick up her walker, take it to the midsection of the road where it's safe, and then they come back and they carry her across the street onto the opposite sidewalk and go back and get her walker and make sure she's all good and then jog back to their car and get in so that they're not holding up traffic any longer. And what can I say? It's nice to see that there is life on this planet. And especially that it exists in some young people. I mean, who knew? But no sooner had I seen this story that warmed the cockles of my heart that I saw another video that made me say I'm getting my belt. So I'm going to play this one for you because it wasn't entirely visual, although it's mostly visual. I'll play it for you as I describe what's going on. So there are two police officers sitting in a car. One of them is visible. One of them is the one filming, or it's his body cam footage. But they are sitting in their squad car in a parking lot. And as the video starts, you see a young, privileged, pampered, spoiled, and highly ignorant, though highly impressed with herself, young person, a young woman, decide that she is going to display her moral superiority over these police officers she doesn't even know, based off of probably the opinions of her equally ignorant college friends. And so she takes her shopping cart and walks right up to their car, crosses the couple of empty spaces between her car and theirs, walks toward their car as quick as she can, and shoves her shopping cart as hard as she can, ramming it into their car, denting it. So here's that confrontation.
Yeah, you were trying to be... What the? Did you...
The whole car rocked. It hit so hard. He's out.
What?
Telling her to get out of the car. She's gotten in, rolled the window up.
She trying to have her weekend be messed up.
Won't comply.
Get out, please. I want to talk to you about that.
Copper.
So he grabs the shopping cart, grabs his cuffs. The cuffs go on the door handle of her car.
To the cart.
And the other side goes onto the shopping cart. Yeah, here. No. Now the window's coming down. Too late. He's walking away.
What you deserve. You're lucky we didn't...
No, wait.
You should be arrested.
So that was, as he said, way less than she deserved. So I think it was a clever solution. I think she did absolutely deserve that. If I was them, I would have driven off and left her there for a couple of days without being able to drive down the road with her car. before I came back and got my cuffs or put her to the cost of having those cuffs cut off her car. And it totally would have served her right. I don't know how long they left her that way. However long it wasn't long enough. So I will just say to this little girl, listen up, witch. Those police officers are the ones that come to your aid when you get too drunk at your college kegger and find yourself in a room with a bunch of frat boys who are not behaving in ways that are legal. It is that cop who comes and puts an end to it and cuffs them and gathers evidence so that the prosecutor can do his job. And if you expect them to do that for you, you might want to think about behaving in a way that shows appreciation instead of showing your pampered, privileged, spoiled brat, witchy little self, who not a soul on this planet other than your equally immature witchy friends has a drop of respect for. Obviously, your parents did not raise you right. Or if they did and you were just too dense to catch on, they should have gone about it the old-fashioned way and gotten a belt and made an impression. All right? I'm not for resorting to that if you're capable of learning by other means, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and assume they tried to instill some basic human decency in you. They obviously failed, so they needed to resort to more basic, primitive methods for your basic IQ. You do not treat police officers that way, especially ones you don't know. It's not like you witnessed these guys doing something terrible. I don't care what your little political games are. You degraded yourself, not them. And the internet is forever, hon. I hope that video gets posted to every job offer you try to go to interview for the next 40 years of your life. I hope your parents refuse to let you visit because they're too ashamed to have you show up on their front door with the neighbors sing, knowing what you did. This sort of stuff needs to stop, and all of the liberal patting on the head of, well, they might be a little misguided, but they got it a little too far, but they had good intentions. No, they didn't. They did not have good intentions. These are your little Frankensteins. You created them, and you need to get them under control. Now, for the laugh story. Considering I was pretty steamed and ready to go rebel southern whoop her ass all over this girl, I needed a laugh story, and I saw one. It was just a meme, just a simple meme, but it was funny. It showed that some fans are accusing Hugh Jackman and Henry Cavill of promoting, quote, unhealthy body standards. And then underneath it says, these fans are, and shows a man that's about 300 pounds living in his mother's basement in front of a computer screen. Fact check, true. But the part about it that's funny is a trick we're seeing used everywhere, which is to capture language and change what it actually means. Okay? Unhealthy is a medical term. It refers to a tangible, measurable thing. Your health. Are you a healthy person or are you not? I don't say that judgmentally. I am not a healthy person. I am disabled. I have several chronic diseases. So if I'm judging anyone, I'm judging me, okay? A lot of health is affected by genetics, some environment, some's within your control, some's without your control. I'm not here to make judgments. I'm just saying that health is an actual thing. It is measurable. It is definable. It's not a loosey-goosey thing. And it certainly doesn't mean my feelings. Okay? Your feelings are important. I'm not saying your feelings don't count. But your feelings are not interchangeable with your health. Those are two separate concepts. Your health is your physical body and its fitness to survive. Your feelings have nothing to do with your physical body. It is your emotional state influenced by your environment and the chemicals going on in your brain at the time. It is random, unpredictable, it is powerful, but it's not very reliable. So to say that Hugh Jackman and Henry Cavill are promoting unhealthy body standards would only be true if these were two unhealthy men. Now, I don't think they're going to take me up on it, but I'd be happy to stress test these boys and verify their health, okay? The accusation is not that these men are unhealthy, and if you aim to be like them, you will be unhealthy. That is ludicrous. What you mean is unhealthy body image, which once again, those are two separate things. Body image is about your self-perception, how you feel about yourself, and whether that is in a good place or a bad place, but that's not about health or an unhealthy concept, because health is related to your physical body. Okay? And if you get your body in the physical shape of either Hugh Jackman or Henry Cavill, God bless you. Okay? Because there's a reason why women will go sit through an X-Men movie. Okay? We are waiting for the 5 minutes when Hugh Jackman takes his shirt off. Okay? We don't care about all the rest of your little superhero world. Okay? There is a reason we go to see Thor. And it's not for Loki. He's funny. I like the dude. But he ain't the one I'm watching. And Henry Cavill's body was sculpted to play Superman, people. Alright? Come on. We all know this. And you can say, well, it's not supposed to be that way. It shouldn't be that way. It's not fair that the 300-pound dude in his basement does not get lusted after to the same degree as Hugh Jackman. Maybe it's not fair. I don't really get hung up on thinking about whether something's fair or not, because fair is a concept that a lot of people discuss, but you can't actually do anything about. Because no matter what happens in life, something that's good for one person is always going to be unfair for someone else, and fairness is a totally subjective thing. It's based on how do you feel about it, not what actually happened. And you can say it's unfair that the 100-pound guy in his basement playing a video game is not the sex symbol that Henry Cavill is. But unfair or not, you will never change it. You might even convince a few women who want to be good little liberals to say what you want them to say. But at the end of the day, you give them the choice to go home with Henry Cavill or go home with a 300-pound guy living in a basement. You will see a hole in the wall in the shape of a woman chasing Henry Cavill, okay? You will not change that, not ever. You might get people to say it as part of their cult-like, I pledge allegiance to the liberals, and so I'll say what you want me to say. But certain things are ingrained in us. And, I don't say this to pick on men, because, hey, ladies, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but this cuts both ways. Guys, if given the choice between going home with a Victoria's Secrets model or Lizzo, are going to go home with the Victoria's Secrets model if they're given that choice. Okay? These are realities of life, fair or unfair. I'm not here to judge. I'm just saying what is, because I don't really care about what should be, might be fairer, whatever. This is what is, all right? And you can try to shame people about it, but deep down they're not ashamed of the fact. I don't know of a single woman that is going to sit here and beat herself up based off this story because she enjoys the sight of Henry Cavill in spandex. Okay? I guarantee you that she will be buying those movie tickets no matter how many times you tell her that hurts the guy in the basement's feelings. She's going to do it anyway. And vice versa. When it comes to the way men view women, we are programmed this way. So can we please stop with all the games? And most of all, can we stop with the language hostage takers? Words have meanings. You can call a war a genocide, but if it was the same thing, we wouldn't have come up with different words to describe it. In both cases, people die. In both cases, that is incredibly tragic. But they are still not the same thing, just like a person that dies in a massive pileup on the freeway. That was not a genocide. Nobody did this to them. It was an accident. Is it tragic? Of course it's still tragic. But just because they both have the element of tragedy to them does not make them the same thing. They are tragic in different ways. One is a tragic accident. One is like 6 million Jews are dead in Auschwitz, okay? By people that had fun doing it. So, I mean, are they both bad? Yeah. In both cases, were there people that died? Yeah. Are there people that will miss them and grieve for them? Yeah. Are they the same thing? No. The person that got into an accident on the freeway did not do the same thing as a guard in Auschwitz, okay? Words have meanings. This is why it was a mistake to take dictionaries out of schools, okay? That's what dictionaries were for. They taught children meanings. And for all you people that think that Googling a definition counts, it doesn't count, because all those definitions have been rewritten by Google to be meaningless. You can't tell a difference in the definition of murder and kill. Like a soldier that kills in a war, or a man that kills defending his wife, a person is dead, but that is not the same as murder, like O.J. Simpson sat in the dark, put the gloves on, got a knife, and nearly decapitated his wife, okay? Those are not the same acts. In both cases, yes, there is a similarity in that a person is dead, but there are a lot of things that are different. Hence the reason we created a different word for it, to describe the differences. Yes, there's always going to be a few things that are the same, but if all the things were the same, we wouldn't have needed a separate word. So go down to your local bookstore and ask them where they keep the W's. You know, use the old Dewey Decimal System. Find Webster's, preferably one that was written in the 90s, that has not been rewritten, and start learning these things, okay? So the DNC is finally over. Thank the Lord. It was quite a circus, quite a spectacle. We still have only a few tidbits more about Kamala than we did before. Basically, she's going to tax unearned income, unrealized income. And let me break that down for you. That means if you own a home and you bought it for $100,000, okay, and you've lived in it for this year, and there's a housing crisis next year, and so next year it's worth $200,000. But you haven't sold your house, so you don't have $200,000 in your bank. You've spent all your money buying that house. But still, that profit that you don't have is what they call unrealized gains. That's what she wants to tax. And she wants to tax it at 25%. Meaning, if your home just went up by $100,000, you have to pay $25,000 to keep your home. Or you have to sell your home and buy a smaller home in order to pay for that difference. And then next year, if the housing market crashes and your home not only is not worth the $200,000 that you paid income tax on, but now maybe it's worth even less than you paid for it, it's not like you're getting that money back. That's why we don't tax this kind of stuff. And that's why economics, while boring, is important to understand. These ideas are disastrously bad. And for the people who want to say, no, she'll only do it to businesses, well, how do you think that works? Mom and pop businesses have all their capital invested in the business, in their employees. They have a narrow profit margin. They can't pay for the cost of their business going up, the overall business being worth more, unless they sell that business, putting a bunch of people out of work. You're going to cause crashes, or you're going to cause them to have to fire employees to make up the difference in the money they had to pay to the government. And I would remind everyone that income taxes started out as a thing that, no, that was never going to be for everyone. That was only going to be for the wealthiest 1%. Where are we now? That's how these things work. This is a bad idea, one in a series of bad ideas that I will be covering in not this upcoming series, but the one after that, my October series, that will break down the candidates position by position and compare out of their own mouths what they've said they plan to do and what it will actually mean, and you can cross-compare on who's the lesser of two evils. But aside from basically telling us that she's going to crash the world's economy with some of the worst ideas to come out of anyone's mouth since Joseph Stalin took over the Soviet Union, and communism was tried and failed again, I know that the Democrats are saying right now, just ignore the fact that everybody's saying these ideas are communist. Well, if they were saying they were communist just as a way of saying a mean name, like, oh, you commie, you'd have a point, because we all should ignore just mean names. But when they mean, no, these are actually communist ideas. The communists tried these very things, and nowhere in the history of the world has a communist idea ever led to a good economy, ever. Not once, not anywhere, not Cuba, not Venezuela, not Russia, not China, nowhere, ever in the history of this planet. So when they say, yeah, these are straight out of the Communist Handbook, yeah, you might want to listen to that. Because, the black markets in the Soviet Union where you were, selling your blood for a loaf of bread didn't exactly look great to me. But the DNC, even according to them, was not really about policies. They said straight out that they thought it didn't really matter what policies were. Nobody actually cares about that, which it's like, really? Yeah, I kind of care. They only care about vibes and if they like the person, which, I'm sorry, but if that's how you vote, you really need to rethink something. You're not adopting somebody. Okay, you're not making them part of your family. It doesn't matter if you like them or not, if you'd want to be friends with them or not. You're hiring them for a job. They're hired for the job of running the country, and that's about can they do that job, not about do I like them, do they make me feel warm and fuzzy. It's about can they do that job, and if all else fails, and it usually does, can they do that job better than the only other choice I have? So I actually dispute that. But aside from the million times they mentioned the joy, the other big point of the DNC seemed to be saying how people with money are evil, which is ironic considering that the people saying this have a hell of a lot of money. So one comedian was pointing that out. Here you go.
guy yelling, "Screw the billionaires," followed immediately by a very happy billionaire.
The screaming man would be Bernie Sanders.
It's all okay if it's our billionaire.
The billionaire would be the owner of the Hyatt hotel chain.
I don't like billionaires, but he's all right. They had guys making fun of people for going to Yale, and a bunch of people who went to Yale. The Democrats had people who prosecuted sexual predators, and
that would be a picture of Bill Clinton. Mr. I went to Epstein Island multiple times, Clinton.
There goes that booking.
Yep, you will not be invited to speak at the DNC, my friend. The highlight of the convention was Michelle Obama's speech, which, produced more Meg Ryan-style fake orgasms all over the media, because it was just so wonderful. Now, allow me to provide a tiny drop of context here. Barack Obama had no money before going into politics. His first job out of college was straight into politics, and he has worked in politics ever since. His wife, Michelle, worked her first job out of law school at a law firm very, very briefly, and has not worked since. They have been in politics, starting with nothing, and now have over $100 million. Their two children each have trust funds north of $10 million apiece. They have 3 homes. And she is going to sit here and tell everyone at the DNC how important it is to be a regular person, and how money is bad, and how we should hate anyone that's got money, which I'm thinking of taking her up on that. But we should hate anyone that's got money because it's about the regular people, and it's just such a shame that you can't go from nothing to something in the United States, even though her family would be the exact example of doing that. So, here was what she had to say.
She and my father didn't aspire to be wealthy. In fact, they were suspicious of folks who took more than they needed.
Martha Vineyard home, $12 million. D.C. home, $8,100,000. Hawaii home, $8,700,000 home. Her suit that she was wearing as she said this, $2,500. Her heels, as she said this, over $1,000. Yeah, forgive me for not feeling bad for you or buying your I'm one of you people grift. Unfortunately for Michelle, all of the wind got taken out of her sails when RFK Jr. made an announcement that he would be, for all practical purposes, dropping out of the race. He is staying on the ballot in states that are not battleground states, but at this point, for reasons that I will elaborate on in my October series that will break down all the candidates, I'm still going to do the piece on him, even though he is no longer running for president in all reality. He's trying to get enough votes that he could form his own party at this point. He intends to be part of the Trump administration should they win, because he is pulling his names from any swing states that might go either way. He does not want to be a spoiler, and he does not want to increase the risk that he might draw votes from Trump, allowing Kamala to win, because he believes that would be disastrous. It was Kamala who refused to even meet with him. It was Kamala who refused to hear any of his ideas, who censored him, who kept him from being included in the debates, who played very dirty about how the Democrat nominee was even chosen. He went into all that in his speech. I'll be getting into that later. But he made a very effective speech, probably one of the most effective political speeches I've heard in a long time. He laid out some really fantastic health goals that he would be pursuing under Trump, should Trump get in. Some really startling health statistics on Americans' disease rate compared with the rest of the world, and what is behind that, and what can be done about it. And it was shocking, and it was hopeful at the same time. It was very moving. And then later on that night, he appeared at a Trump rally. You had Roman candles going off. You had rock music blaring. It was effective. I have to give him that. Trump promised to release all of the remaining documents on the Kennedy assassination, which thrilled the hell out of me. I want to see it. Because, I'm sorry, if you expect me to buy the magic bullet theory, I don't really have any beliefs about who was behind that assassination, but I don't believe Oswald was a lone shooter. Maybe Oswald was part of it. Maybe he was a patsy. But there was more than one shooter there that day. Because in order for it to be Oswald, he fired 3 shots. One missed completely and went into the wall. They know that because they dug the bullet out. The other shot was the headshot. Meaning that the second bullet, the middle bullet, had to be responsible for all the other gunshot wounds, or there was a second shooter. And for that bullet to be responsible for all the other gunshot wounds, and Oswald to be the only shooter, would require it to zigzag, go up, down, stop, turn around in midair, and do a bunch of other stuff that the government expects me to believe under their magic bullet theory. Now, I mean, if anybody else even came up with something called the magic bullet theory, it would be called a conspiracy theory. But because it's the government's conspiracy theory, we're supposed to believe it. So I want to see the evidence. I don't understand, if there's nothing there, why it had to be hid for 80 years to begin with. What are you afraid of us seeing? There's no reason to hide it. There's no national security that can be affected by it anymore. If Cuba was behind it, Cuba is not a problem for us anymore. If Russia was behind it, the Soviet Union fell. If it was CIA, it's going to look awfully bad. If Johnson was involved, it'll look really bad. But the mob doesn't have the same kind of power that it used to, so there's no matter who is behind it or who wasn't, it really can't affect things anymore. So the only reason to keep it a secret is because the public is not going to respond well to who was behind it. So if Trump keeps that promise and releases it, I am interested to see what's in there. But the Kennedy family immediately had to post a statement denouncing their brother for siding with Trump. They are Democrat royalty, and they see this as a betrayal. They're allowed to disagree with him, okay? I mean, they don't have to say, yes, he's our brother, so whatever he does is right. They're allowed to say, look, he's voting for Trump, and we're still voting for Kamala, and we can agree to disagree. But to come out and personally attack him as though he's a bad person for the decision he's made really says more about them than it does about him. So here's what they said. Statement on Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s announcement today. We want an America filled with hope and bound together by a shared vision of a brighter future. A future defined by individual freedom, economic promise, and national pride. So far, I agree with that. We believe in Harris and Waltz. You lost me. Our brother Bobby's decision to endorse Trump today is a betrayal of the values that our father and our family hold most dear. It is a sad ending to a sad story. Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, Courtney Kennedy, Kerry Kennedy, Chris Kennedy, and Rory Kennedy. I did not know their father, RFK. I, still had a couple of decades to go before I would even be born when he was tragically killed. So maybe they're right. Maybe Daddy would be ashamed of RFK Jr. I think that is a despicable thing to say publicly to him, to bring up your assassinated father in public and say that he would be ashamed of you because of who you vote for. The Kennedy family has always been a family that has prided themselves on debate. And for debate to happen, you have to disagree about things. You're supposed to be able to argue your position and put it out there and say, well, I think this. And then either you can make a case to defend that or you can't. That was the idea of Kennedy's, that they would sit around the dinner table. That was Camelot, so that you would argue about these things and still love each other as family. So the idea that you would bring up the father that he watched get shot as he was watching the television as a young boy and invoke his father and claim that you know what his father would feel and that it would be shame and that what he was doing was a betrayal to his memory, that is so far below the belt. I don't care who he's voting for. I very much despise Kamala and Waltz. The only politicians I despise more are AOC, Rashida Tlaib, and Ilhan Omar. But if he had come out and said he was going to endorse them, and I'd be like, geez, I disagree with you right down the line, and I'm ready to argue why, I still would not have invoked his father as a way to weaponize a tragic memory. And if you're going to, really say that because he wants to see Americans healthy again, that that's a betrayal of JFK and RFK, I mean, as I said, I certainly wasn't personally familiar with them. I didn't even live during that era. But, I mean, I've seen the videos. These were physically fit guys. JFK did have some health problems. He had Addison's disease. He had broken his back serving in World War II and heroically, with a broken back, had swam, dragging another sailor as he swam with a rope around this other sailor in his teeth with a broken back as he's swimming. He saved this man. This was a heroic, fit man. And the Kennedys were always very athletic, very outdoors, very embracing of America. He played chicken with Khrushchev and won. Khrushchev thought he could bully him around because he was a young pup and he didn't know what he was doing. And he found out, yeah, I'm going to blink first when it came to the Cuban Missile Crisis. And once again, I don't personally know the Kennedys, but if the things I hear about JFK are true, then one thing I feel confident in saying, even without having known the man, is that he sure as hell knew what a woman was. So I'm not so sure your daddy and your uncle would be on your side as much as you seem to think is a given that they would. Maybe they would. You knew them better, but then again, so did Bobby. He is just as much their child as you are. So these kind of personal attacks really need to start being frowned on, even if you also are angry at Bobby for joining Trump's team. You can be that. You can say, I think he's wrong, and here's why. But when you hit below the belt and say our dead, shot father would be ashamed, and you've made him sad, and you've betrayed and besmirched his memory. Now you're using tactics that, first of all, have nothing to do with the point of make your case for your candidate. And second, that shows a pretty sad moral depravity, and I don't like this kind of stuff that I have seen encouraged in the Democrat Party, which is supposedly the party of tolerance, who is supposed to celebrate diversity of everything except thought, apparently, which, by the way, is the only kind of diversity that is inherently beneficial. And one more thing on the economics of this all, because, as I said, the economics are boring, but they are important to understand if you don't want your life wrecked. So I saw a meme that I thought really captured the, I hate to use the word, misinformation being used about inflation. Shows two businessmen talking, and one of them is saying to the other, inflation is due to greedy price gouging. And the other guy looks at him, kind of eyebrow raised, and he says, did the people who print trillions of dollars tell you that? Exactly. Inflation has nothing to do with greed. Okay, I know that that's an easy explanation to accept if you don't stop and think about it, but people have always been greedy. That doesn't explain why inflation happens. People will be as greedy as they can get away with, but that's the rub right there, as greedy as they can get away with. I can say, I'm going to charge you $1 million to listen to my podcast. And what's going to happen? I won't get my $1 million. You have millions of podcasts to listen to. You will go somewhere else. If I say I'm going to charge you $1 million for this pencil, you're going to not pay me just because I'm greedy enough to demand it. You're going to go to a big box store or even Walmart and buy a huge box of pencils for 96 cents. People can be as greedy as they want, but it only works if other people are willing to pay for it. Now, what creates situations where other people are willing to pay for it? What is the real cause behind inflation? Because people are always greedy. It's not like this is something humanity just discovered in the past 4 years, conveniently enough. Everybody got greedy in the last 4 years. Greed's got nothing to do with it. Greed has always been there. Just, watch Wall Street. Watch The Wolf of Wall Street. I mean, that wasn't in the past 4 years. What, did the greedy people stop and come back? I mean, that makes no sense. This has nothing to do with greed and price gouging. I used to think that inflation was something that just happened. That over time, things cost more and money is worth less, and that just is what happens. I never really thought about the why. I just accepted it as a fact of life, like we breathe in and out. But no, inflation is something that is deliberately triggered. And I have listened to enough people to understand, at least on a basic level, and yes, if you have much deeper economic insight than me, then you'll probably be able to expand on this much further. But the point is to make it simple enough for everybody to understand, people like me, to be able to understand. The idea is that when the government is buying too much, going too far in debt into other countries, and things are starting to get tight, they have two options. They can either tell you that they're going to raise a tax, we're coming for your money, hand it over, which will upset people and they'll refuse and you'll have a problem and you'll get nowhere. Or they can steal that money through inflation. And here's how it works. You print a bunch of extra money. So if I had $100 in my bank account and the government says, I'm going to take a tax of $20, and I say, like hell you are, there's not a lot they can do unless they can get enough people to agree with them, which is unlikely. Most people don't like paying taxes. So what they do is they print a bunch of extra money, which means that every dollar is worth less. I still have $100 in my bank account, but it's not worth $100 anymore. It's worth $80. I can only buy $80 worth of goods with it. It's how they steal from the American public, and it has nothing to do with greed. It has everything to do with printing money, printing extra money every time you want to pay for things that we don't have. We all understand how budgets work. You can say, I want a Tesla. You can even say, I need a Tesla because I need a car that has these certain features with my disabilities. But I don't have the money for a Tesla, so I don't have a Tesla. You have to have the money to buy the things you need. Even a starving man has to be able to buy the loaf of bread. Does he need that loaf of bread? Yes, he really, really does. But unless somebody comes along and gives it to him, the only other option is he has to be able to find a way to pay for it. He has to have the money. And the government has not operated under those very basic principles, partly because, like the Obamas, none of these people have ever had real jobs. They've never worked for a real company. They've never run a real company. They don't understand how any of this works, even though they're put in charge of how it works. They think, if I want something, I put it on my credit card, and I just keep putting it on my credit card and just keep putting it on there and keep putting it on there and keep putting it on there. And they do that with our national debt. Oh, well, we need to pay for the housing for all the immigrants. Well, if we had the money to do that, then we could argue about whether or not we should. We could argue about, well, my ancestors didn't get housing paid for them. They were taken off the boat and told, sink or swim, baby. You know, you get to be here. That's our gift. We're letting you in the door. And whatever happens after here is on you, sink or swim. We can argue about whether that's still the policy that it should be, or whether we should fund them and give them a better start or whatever, if you have the money. If you don't even have the money, there's no point in having that argument. It's not there. It's not there to pay for. But these politicians don't understand reality. They've never had to live in it. They don't understand it. So they just print more money, just like charging things on their credit card. The ones that do understand anything about economics know that that means they're actually stealing from your bank account, because the money you've worked hard to save is now worth less. They don't care. Inflation has nothing to do with greed, not even a little bit, because greed only works when somebody's willing to pay for it, when they're desperate. And inflation, we were talking about definitions of word, is a actual thing. We know what it is. We know what causes it. This is not up for debate. They're just hoping that enough people don't know what it means or how it works, or like me, kind of thought it's just something that naturally happens and is unavoidable. And they're counting on that ignorance, which is why I'm passing on this little bit of information, because it is important to know when the people in charge are lying to you, and also to be reminded of the fact, if you want a business to run well, if you want an economy to run well, you might want to consider putting someone in charge who understands how business and economies work. To put somebody in charge who has never had a real job since even their college days gets you these kind of ideas where they think it's all right to steal from the little people, because who cares about the peasants anyway? They don't really matter. They'll do what they're told because we know what's best for them. We are Big Brother. It's very New World, 1984, Fahrenheit 451 dystopia. These are quite literally the people in the Capitol in the Hunger Games movies who live in a totally different reality than the people in the districts, and don't even understand why the people in the districts won't just do what they're told to do, because it's all for them anyway. So, yeah, they can point to the fact that a lot of Republicans have a lot of money. Truth is, so do a lot of Democrats. Politicians in general have a lot of money. So I'm not going to vote against somebody because they got a lot of money, because that's going to rule out pretty much everybody. And if we're willing to do that, fine. But if the person that gets in is going to have a lot of money anyway, then I don't understand why that's supposed to count against anybody. So I'm more concerned about my money than their money. I don't really care if they have money. I don't care if they have lots of money or little money. By the way, Trump is the only president in like the last 60 years. Or no, excuse me, that was a different statistic. He is the only president in our history, modern history, to leave the White House with less money than he went in. That cannot be said of the Obamas, who now have $100 million. So, as I've said repeatedly and will go on saying, there is a lot I don't like about Trump. But my problems with him don't have anything to do with the fact that he's rich. Because these people are rich too. I don't care about their money. I care about my money. So stop printing money as a way to stick your hands into my back pocket, feel me up, and take what little I have to live on. So before moving on to the actual retro podcast, let me play you just a few second clip of the Reverend, air quotes, Mark Thompson, something along that line, at the DNC, because what he says is actually the truth, which is rare from a Democrat. It's a despicable truth, but it's the truth, so might as well put it out there.
We got 70 days to act right, y'all. That's right. Now, after 7 days, we can go back there and crazy.
7?
You heard him. We just need to hold on for 70 days to Election Day, pretend, lie through our teeth that we will be moderate, and then, as he said, quote, we can go back to being crazy. This is the Democrat Party. The party that thinks it's okay to lie to the voters because what you want to do will actually be very, very bad for them. So lie to their face, get their votes, and then we can get ours for the next 4 years. They said this at their convention, which is really all I need to know about their whole campaign. Which brings us up to today's retroactive podcast. It was a rare standalone article that I wrote at the time because I was ticked off at Tucker Carlson. I realize I'm going to make the right just swoon with disapproval because he's one of their deities. But I don't like the guy. I don't think that just because he used to be the guy you liked to watch on Fox News, that means what he says today is right. When he says that we dropped the nuclear bomb on Japan to punish its citizens, that is just factually not true. Now you can argue about should we have dropped the bomb, or should we have not dropped the bomb? Should we have done the only other option, which would have been to blockade off Japan and starve the citizens out, in which case more citizens of Japan would have died, and it would have taken a lot longer, and the war would have gone on, and our men would have died as well. But at least the people that died wouldn't have died in a painful nuclear explosion. Not that starving to death is some painless death, but if you want to have that argument, we can have that argument about should the bomb have been dropped or should it have not been dropped. But to make the statement that we did it as collective punishment is just not true. It had nothing to do with punishing the people of Japan. It had everything to do with the fact that we knew from our intelligence and our interactions with the Japanese powers, the people controlling their military, the people in high positions of Imperial Japan, were not going to surrender. They were going to die to the last man. And even after the first bomb was dropped, we had intel saying that they were going to keep going. They were going to continue fighting. It wasn't until they saw, no, they're going to just do this however many times they have to do it, and the second bomb was dropped 5 days later, that they decided to surrender. And there were a few generals that even then were adamantly against it and basically walked out of the meeting because they lost when a few people were saying, no, this is not tenable anymore. This is not a winnable war anymore. And so you can argue about whether or not we should have dropped the bomb, but I don't like people who lie to other people. Historically, we know what our reasons for dropping the bomb were, and it had nothing to do with punishing innocent civilians of Japan. Now, is that a separate issue from the morality of dropping a bomb that we knew would accidentally, as a side effect, but predictably kill a lot of civilians? Well, that is a separate issue, and that's a conversation that I'm perfectly willing to have. But you can't go back and put whatever motives you want to on people when we know what their motives were. We have transcripts of discussions. We have the arguments. We have journals. We have letters. We have all kinds of stuff. We know why they dropped the bomb, and it was not for the reason Tucker Carlson said. I also do not like how anti-American he has become. There are things that are bad about America. I'm not someone here to say that you can never, ever criticize America. Criticism is how we get better. But there is a difference between saying, yeah, when America did this, it was wrong, and we don't want to continue down that path anymore. We are changing our approach and doing this from here on out. Well, that's fine. We did that with civil rights. We did that with a lot of things. That's fine. That's part of the evolution of America. But when you act like we are bad, our entire history is bad, everything we're built on is bad, and from what I've seen of Tucker, he is crossing into that line. He is mixing up the parts of the government that have become corrupt, and I do agree there are parts of the government that have become corrupt. I've just been talking about some of them. But to say those parts have grown bad over time and need to be rooted out and restore the nation to its healthy American status, that's one thing. When you want to say America wasn't ever healthy, we've always been some corrupt, evil thing, well then I strongly disagree with you. I think you don't really have a grasp of history. You are just making an emotional argument that suits you right now because you're frustrated with the government. And that's understandable. I often get frustrated myself. But one thing you don't have a right to do in your frustration is to lie to people. You do not get to do that. You can talk about why you're frustrated. You can make your case for what needs to be changed. But you don't get to lie to people, and I've seen Tucker Carlson get caught in some lies. Does that mean that some of the things he says are right? Well, yeah, of course some of the things he says are right. But I don't trust people who lie to me. I think that is a bad habit. And this acceptance that, well, everybody lies. No, actually that's not true. There are some people who hold themselves to a standard of they do not allow themselves to resort to lying when they're losing an argument. It's rare, but it does exist. So, can somebody be mistaken? Yeah, absolutely. That's different. That's not a lie. That's a mistake. And now I know different, and I'm changing my mind. Can their ideas evolve over time? As I've grown and seen more of life, I've kind of come to change. This happened to me, and that gave me a new perspective. And of course, that's called maturing. That's something we should do. But I'm going to just tell you something that is actually false because it suits the argument I want to make. No, that is not okay. And it should not be tolerated, whether he's on your side or not. I don't make excuses for people on the basis of, well, they're on our side, so we need to just... No. I'm not on anybody's side. I'm an independent. I've said that all along. I'm going to call it out on the left. I'm going to call it out on the right. And everybody can have their little hissy fit. I don't really care. Because what matters to me is not my side. It doesn't matter to me that I win if I have to win dirty. I care about the truth. And I'm fallible like any other person. I will make mistakes, but they will be honest mistakes that I will correct as soon as I realize they were mistaken. So, this piece that I wrote back in early May, I believe, might have been April, is entitled, Enough Propaganda. I am so fed up with Tucker Carlson's propagandizing for Putin and Russia that I am interrupting my work on my new series to voice my opinion publicly. I don't know whether he is an incredibly incompetent journalist or a stooge, and at this point, I don't even know which one I'm hoping for. I find it hard to believe that he is incompetent enough after a long career in journalism not to know how to research things better before feeding them to his audience. And yet, if that is not the case, and I would rather believe that of him, otherwise, I have to believe that he is deliberately propagandizing for dictators to fellow Americans against everything America stands for. Here are a couple of blatant examples. This was referring to the trip he had taken to Russia and the tapes he released. This was in response to that. He showed us a glorious train station in Moscow, clean, stunning, unspoiled by graffiti and unpopulated with dangerous assailants, on full display to dazzle the senses, complete with ethereal classical music. But failed to tell you that this same train station was built 70 years ago with money made by invading Ukraine, killing its people, and selling their stolen grain. So it's real easy to say that good and bad, right and wrong, ideals and politics don't matter as much as outcomes do. But I'm betting the dead Ukrainians would dispute that and make a pretty compelling case while doing it. We do have a huge crime problem in our urban areas, and our politicians are escalating and exploiting it rather than fixing it. But that is not a reason to clearly imply that the fix to American problems is to get ourselves a dictator like Putin. Nor did Tucker bother to go to other parts of Russia besides Moscow to see how well the average Russians live. All people pay up under a dictatorship, but only its capital and the elites immediately surrounding the area benefit from those glorious edifices, even as the entirety of the rest of the people live in absolute squalor. Did you see the Hunger Games, Tucker? Very nice capital in that story, too. Not so nice in the districts. Do you plan to sell that to the American people? Because even a Gen Z kid who doesn't know how to read a real clock could expose the downside there. Or have you just not sold your platform to anyone promoting that yet? You couldn't be bothered to go anywhere that wasn't on the official tour. But people who actually live in Russia and have immigrated to other parts of the world, which should tell you something right there if you think things are great there. They consistently report that the West is an upgrade compared to the life of the average citizen and their civil protections in Russia. Why don't you ask Konstantin Kisin? I don't notice him making plans to move back to this safe and flourishing paradise of yours. Tucker also went to a grocery store and raved over the carts that wouldn't give you your coin back unless you returned them. Matt Walsh would swoon. But it's a marvel that every person who has ever shopped at an Aldi's in the United States has already seen. Maybe if you had to shop bargain like the rest of us, Tucker, you could have seen that wonder without having to circumnavigate the globe. And yes, they had a fancy cart escalator with a wheel locking mechanism. It was impressive. But if I was Alexei Navalny, who just mysteriously died in a Siberian prison, I'm not sure I would find that trade-off worth it. A perfectly healthy guy in the previous day's video, bouncing around, emaciated, but clearly active and feeling well enough to joke and laugh, and today he's joined the ranks of Putin's opponents, who all mysteriously die at 47. And we know for a fact that this guy was poisoned once before. He landed in a European hospital having come from Russia, where they verified that there was military-grade neurotoxins in his blood. Can you spell KGB, Tucker? I'm thinking the ideals of good and bad, however nebulous they may be to you, mattered to him, and now matter to the people he left behind. But yes, groceries are cheap there. Or are they? You bought a week's worth of groceries for a family of 4 for around $100. And you say the same test in the United States ran you about $400. So we spend 4 times as much for groceries as Russians do. That is outrageous. If you don't consider their income. Per capita, Russians make $13,000 a year, whereas Americans per capita make $70,000 a year. So our groceries cost 4 times as much, but we earn over 5 times as much, on average, per capita. And that's if you make the most generous spin on the Russian economy. The reality is that per capita is not a very good way to gauge the typical Russian's life. Because unlike America, where you have a pretty big middle class, some mega wealthy elite, and very few poor people, 2% by world standards, in Russia you have basically no middle class, a handful of the uber wealthy, and almost everyone else lives in extreme poverty. So averaging it out makes things look a lot better than they are. If you look at the average income of most Russians, not per capita, but based on what is the most common salary for them to earn, it is between $590 and $750 a month. That is $7,080 up to $9,000 per year. Who do you know living on that in America, Tucker? People on welfare make more than that. That Russian trying to feed his family of 4 with groceries that cost him $100 per week, or $430 per month, because there are 4.3 weeks per month, he'll have between $160 or at most $320 left over after buying food for all of the needs of 4 people for the rest of the month, including rent or mortgage, heating or electricity, kind of important, in Siberia, medical care, water, clothing, toilet paper, etc. There sure won't be an iPhone for Christmas, I can pretty much guarantee you. There won't even be a Stanley Cup. His groceries alone add up to 2/3 of his income, give or take $10. Things are tight here in the good old US of A. Extremely tight if you live on a fixed income, as I do. And inflation is beyond ridiculous. Yet the dollar is still worth that much more than Russian rubles. And nobody here is spending 2/3 of their total income on groceries alone. If you think Russia and Putin are doing it right, Tucker, show us the rural people, half of which have no indoor plumbing. 1/3 of those don't even have the outhouse that the others do. Why don't you drop trow in the Arctic snow in your own yard for the world to see before you praise Putin's Russia with a straight face? Vast swaths of the population, even in cities, still use outhouses. That train station might not have smelled, but your neighbor's yard is going to. Just ask a San Franciscan under Gavin Newsom. Does anyone in America lack indoor plumbing other than by choice, like if they're Amish or something? Or, living out in a cabin in the woods? By the numbers, even accounting for cheap groceries, so-called cheap groceries, our average citizen is financially 9 to 10 times better off than the average Russian citizen. You're right, Tucker. Outcomes do matter. You just can't bother to tell the whole story about them. So, if you'd like to swap an American life for a Russian one, put your money where your mouth is and see what the free press consists of in Alexei's world. I'll be staying here. I am used to irrational idiocy from the extreme left, and I'm fed up with the willful malice from the extreme right. There are a boatload of serious problems that are critical to our survival to be fixed in the USA and in the West in general, and all of them can be fixed by getting serious over choosing nice-sounding ideals and by electing good and capable leaders, which we are failing to do, but none of which requires or would improve under a dictator. As Thomas Sowell said, and I'm paraphrasing here, we've traded doing what works for doing what sounds good. We need to stop giving a flying rat's ass about what sounds good and go back to doing what works. If the implication that we need a dictator in order to have success is the best propaganda you can contribute to the already steaming pile of garbage being tossed around as viable solutions, then you are either stupidly uninformed and too lazy to improve that, or you're now bought and paid for. Which of those guys do you want to be? Either way, if this is your idea of reporting, I have absolutely no further need of your services as a journalist. So, now that I've ticked off the liberals from my opinions of their Ringling Brothers DNC, and now that I've ticked off all the Trumpy MAGA right people by pointing out that Tucker Carlson is indeed fallible and really needs to explain his positions on some stuff if he's going to be listened to at all. And that's a big if. I think my job is done here. Hopefully, you'll be back next week.